Shall we begin?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Legion Quest. This is your premier defunct podcast all about the FX series Legion. I am, as always, your host, Zachary Jenkins, and with me is my pal, Matt Sibley. Matt, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I can't believe we're almost at the new season. We made it through another hiatus.
We did. I mean, look, let's be fair. This hiatus was a little bit longer and a little bit more challenging. But I think we came up with some real good content to fill the people's mind brains while we were gone.
Yeah, no, definitely. The episode where we just sort of tried to find rhymes with characters' names, I think that's one of the high points.
Yeah, here's the thing. David doesn't have a lot to rhyme with, and that was our starting point. But I really think we came through.
Yeah, well, once we got to, Lenny, everything just rolled.
Yeah, Lenny's a good one. Like, it's good because there's an in-universe joke about how Lenny has several names.
Yeah.
Man, okay, it's been so long, I forgot. This show's really good, right?
Yeah. But how long has it been? Like a year? It
Yeah,
has no meaning anymore.
Yeah, no, we're all kind of stuck. There's a time traveler in the third and final season, so that just means that none of this in linear time matters anymore. And because of that, we decided to bring a third heat to this podcast, someone to help guide us through the next little bit, and that is my friend Adam Reck. Adam, how you doing today?
I am very good. I spiked my hair up as high as I possibly could for this episode. So thank you for having me on Legion Quest. This is very exciting.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you.
Adam, if you don't know, is my co-host on this small other podcast I do, Battle of the Atom, which I'm sure none of you have heard of. And honestly, let's break kayfabe for a second. If you got through all this and didn't, triple check your podcatcher, good for you for playing along, guys. I'm really proud. Oh yeah, the power of bits. Look, I think that's one thing we've learned from Legion Quest. Sometimes weird esoteric bits that don't really go anywhere but are kind of set dressing can really make a show, like a sushi bar that's unlimited and that's the only conference room.
It's a very specific analogy.
It is a very specific analogy. Because, okay, does the sushi conference room come back in season 3? Adam, go.
No. If only because...
Matt, go.
Yeah.
Final scene, yeah.
Oh.
Okay, perfect.
Gotta be again.
All right.
I love that.
I mean, I'd love to see it again. I'd love to go there, but I don't think it's going to be back.
Which will be sad. But today, to make things less sad, and to get us to the upcoming Legion Season 3, which I believe, as this airs, comes on tonight.
Ooh.
Synergy.
Yeah. Synergy. Definitely planned this way. A lot of things in the near future have just been pure synergy and not happenstance that's working out wildly in our favor.
Real Hickman long-term planning here.
Real Hickman long-term planning here. You are absolutely right, Matt. But no, today we decided to go through 3 different X-Men stories all about Legion and rank them on an ever-expanding list of every X-Men story ever from A to Z. Does that sound familiar to anyone on this call?
I'm Adam.
Hey. Wrong bit. Wrong bit.
Sorry.
So it's going to be fun. This is not coming to us from any particular patron. It's coming to us from the FX network, who's not paying us and is not aware of the existence of this podcast.
If they want to give you money, they could definitely.
Dude, if Noah Hawley calls me up and say, hey, here's $20, talk about my show, I'd say, yes, sir. So,
I'd ask more.
Matt's demanding a higher salary for talking about the show, even though we're already doing it.
Anyway, the first story that we are going to talk about tonight is the first appearance of Legion. This is New Mutants 26 through 28 by Bill Sienkiewicz and Chris Claremont, simply titled Legion. Adam, what's this, besides just the concept of Legion, who is many, what is this story about?
Oh, man. We discover that on Muir Island, we have a unbeknownst to Charles Xavier, he has a son with a... what is Gabrielle Haller's official job? What is she? She's a diplomat?
Yes, she is the Israeli ambassador to the UK.
There we go. Okay. So
I think the UK. It might be the US. I don't know. I think her job is plot.
Yeah, sure.
Like, it's whatever the plot needs.
So unbeknownst to Charles, he and the New Mutants go to Muir Island and they meet David Haller. He is not having a good day. And they get sucked into his mind where they meet his multiple personalities. And there are some interesting problematic elements to this story, which we should probably talk about. And it has good Sienkiewicz art in it. And that's the best way I can distill it in a couple sentences.
I think the important thing to note is that Bill Sienkiewicz is a icon and should be respected as such because, this issue is very, very good to look at.
The art is superb, and I am lucky enough that I have the giant IDW Sienkiewicz book. So I looked back through these 3 issues, and especially once they get into David's mindscape, it is just utterly beautiful the way that he illustrates this stuff. We were talking in our last episode about Proteus and about how John Byrne seems to just sort of be the tip of the iceberg in terms of how Proteus is doing his mind warping abilities, reality warping abilities. And here we get Sienkiewicz to really start playing around with our expectations on, how the page is. This is post Demon Bear, so we know he's capable of this kind of stuff. And he really is cutting loose, especially in the 2nd and 3rd issues.
Which is the thing, of everything starts breaking down. He's able to get more abstract. He's able to play with the negative space more as well.
Absolutely. He is a master of some of that stuff. And, there's a reason he is as highly regarded as he is.
Well, and Zach, I think you had actually discovered this the other day. You actually found the panel that they pull the motif for the end credits for Legion FX, which I thought was a really good spot on your part. I probably would have flipped past it and not noticed it.
Yeah, I've read these issues several times, and I noticed that this time. I was like, this is the exact, 60s kind of square, moddy kind of look that they have in the end credits. And I always thought that was just a weird aesthetic choice by Noah Hawley, and it may just be coincidental.
Nah, I don't think so. I think it's purposefully taken. Even the color scheme is the same.
There's things like that, and when the furniture and things start getting thrown about, which is a lot like the kitchen scene of season 1.
Oh yeah,
it's like, even if it's not a direct lifting, it's it's the general idea.
And that's one of the things that Legion, the TV show, I think does well, is it takes inspiration from the comics, but it's very much its own thing, not beholden to them.
Yeah, the ability to pick and choose really helps it out.
Well, and I think it's to its benefit because while these issues are absolutely gorgeous, and I love the idea of there being yet another forgotten child, Proteus Part 2, I do think that there are some things here that have not aged well. In particular, the treatment and description of what's actually, quote unquote, wrong with David, the entire backstory of David and how, his quote unquote, they describe it as his autism was trauma, incited. There's some very strange stuff that Claremont is playing around here with, not the least of which the story begins with the last problematic thing he did, which was turn the 2 characters into Native Americans and send them to Scotland.
Yeah, Tom Corsi and Sharon Friedlander. We'll discuss it when we get to Demon Bear. What a choice!
Oh boy!
But I agree with you. I think Claremont knew what he wanted to do with Legion, but I'm not sure that he, or really the larger culture of the mid '80s, had the right language in place to describe specific mental health conditions. And I think that's something with Legion, the less specific you can be, the better, because at the end of the day, he's also a guy who has a ton of superpowers. And if you're going the route that his superpowers are connected to his mental illness, well, man, you have got to tie that in a very delicate way, and it might just be better to gloss over some of that.
The second you start trying to provide a diagnosis for him is when it gets too caught up in the real.
Yeah, I think it's much better, and we'll talk about this in other stories that we talk about today, but when it becomes an abstract concept that serves the story, I think it's much better. Here, like Matt was just saying, once it gets literal and we start getting into these ideas of the person, the initial idea here is that some of these personalities, particularly the quote unquote Arab, that they seem to be after in issues 2 and 3, are inspired by things that have happened in David's own life. And that's where things, that I find more problematic than other interpretations where maybe the personalities are more spontaneously generated so that David doesn't even know who they are. I just think that there's some different things here that are being played around with that are really interesting, but looking back on them with hindsight, they're not as successful because of that.
Yeah, I think there's some stuff. The one interesting note, I like this story. So one thing that happens, and I don't think it's handled the best, but I have to believe that Claremont and Sienkiewicz had the best intentions when they were going about it. Jamal, who is one of David's personalities in here, and is said to have been literally taken from someone else as a terrorist who attacked David's family and killed his stepfather. He is seen as a sympathetic character here, saying, hey, I got caught up in some stuff when I was younger. I didn't know what was happening. It was a bad situation, and I'm trying to atone for that, and trying to, in whatever way he can, make up for horrible things he did. Where Jack Wayne, who is his Legion's most dominant personality, is very much a standard imperialist villain. Like, he is, I say villain, it's hero. It's hero in those stories in like the early 1900s. Like, he's a pulp hero. And Claremont specifically calls out, hey, this was actually terrible. Why did we let people do this? And
it sounds really interesting though, because of the fact that you have the issues with Legion and the way that they talk about his mental health. It's like a weird middle ground in a way. Like, it's almost getting it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Like, there are things here that are starting to become critical of sort of the John Wayne, like you mentioned, that he's this imperialist conqueror, and that there's a nuance to perhaps what the politics of, Middle East extremism might be. But it's so based in the language of what Claremont's understanding of this is in the 1980s, that, I think looking back on it, it still lacks something. It's almost there, but it's not.
Yeah. So I think all that's good. The one other thing that I'd want to talk about on this issue, how good is Warlock in all of this?
I love when he thanks the Blackbird for taking them to Muir Island. It's so adorable.
Is that in the? I think it is in the second issue when he ends up seeing everyone burned by the flames, and you really feel for him in the sense that he can't fully comprehend what's happening as well. He just knows it's bad.
This is pretty recent into him joining the team, but honestly, Sienkiewicz he created Warlock, but he is the number one Warlock artist. Like, he gets that character should just be a living ink blot on the screen, and he is so good for it.
Yeah, he does a very good job of just kind of scribbling Warlock in. That he's just this blob of ink. I mean, I know when I draw Warlock, I tend to draw him as a robot, and that's just how I like to draw him. But I know that if I was to try and do it Sienkiewicz style, I definitely couldn't do it justice. But we are getting really great character building here in these New Mutants issues with Rain, with Warlock, and we're starting to get that little inkling of like, what's Professor X's backstory, writ large. This is maybe not everything we thought it was.
And it is interesting to go back to it with sort of the hindsight of Legion's parentage. The fact it takes a little bit before it comes spilling out I think you maybe waiting to get to it.
I'd say Xavier even gets some really good moments here because, for one, he calls out, "Oh man, me having a relationship with Gabby Holler when she was my patient, probably a bad thing that I did. That was unethical. This whole thing is because I kind of screwed up pretty big, and I should reassess my life here."
Well, and that's going to come up again in another story we're going to talk about today. Big time.
It is. I do also love that the panels where you find out that David and Xavier are like related. They both have the very big Sienkiewicz eyebrows for Xavier, and that's the one defining feature between them. It's so good.
Bit ironic though that David has such giant hair, given that Charles is so follically challenged, but we won't hold that against anybody.
Has anyone ever drawn Xavier with giant hair? Because I kind of want to see that now.
Oh,
I mean,
Just a flashback.
James McAvoy kind of tried, but he didn't get as far as he needed to. He went with hippie hair, and that doesn't work for Xavier. Now, if he would have gelled all that stuff up, or maybe used some like ozone-depleting hairspray, well, we'll see.
That could have been a very different Days of Future Past movie. I like this arc quite a bit, but I'm kind of interested to hear how you guys would put this on the list, because it's a weird one.
It is weird. Now, on our list, we have 240 X-Men stories.
Yowza.
Starting with the Dark Phoenix saga and going all the way to the very bottom to the Draco, which I've been thinking a lot about recently, which is wild.
I am very sorry.
But we'll get to that. It's actually super good. Not the Draco, but the reason I've been thinking about it. But yeah, let's see. On this list, we have New Mutants 21 Slumber Party at number 12. I think this is worse than Slumber Party.
I agree. At number 28, we have more recent New Mutant story, Dead Souls. I think I like that better than this.
I like Dead Souls more.
Yeah.
What's your thought, Matt? I assume you've read Dead Souls.
Yeah, no, I liked Dead Souls more.
Okay.
I obviously haven't read as many X-Men stories as you guys, but
we've been forced by ourselves.
We've done this to ourselves.
This is our fault.
Yeah.
I would put it maybe somewhere between Uncanny X-Men 111 to 113 Magneto Triumphant, around there.
So that's at 63. And I think that's getting around where I think it should go. What do you think about it compared to the future adventures, or the further adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, where Mr. Sinister is a dandy in, the 1800s in the UK, and he hates Charles Darwin?
I like this better than that. I don't know what Matt thinks.
I think this arc grew on me as I went along. Initially,
I think that's fair.
Yeah. I'm more used to Claremont's rhythms than I was a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then as Sienkiewicz still has the space to break everything down, the way the parallels are all working with sort of parentage and adopted families, things like that.
Okay. I think my ceiling right here might be... last week we started talking about Ultimate X-Men World Tour, which has sort of a version of Legion in the story, a combination David Proteus. But I don't think it's as good as what's above that, which is Planet X. So that would probably be my ceiling. I don't think it would go above that. But I do think it's probably better than like Giant Size X-Men.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. It's definitely better than Giant Size X-Men.
Yeah.
Definitely worse than Planet X. Which puts Ultimate X-Men World Tour and X Factor The Longest Night, the first arc of the Peter David investigations, right in the middle of it.
I might have to put it above both of those just for the Sienkiewicz art. I mean, the story is problematic.
That art's pretty darn good.
But that art is classic, and it's very difficult to best it. So I would put it personally at 54.
All right, so I think that's fair. Our new number 54 is New Mutants Legion.
Nice. All right, let's...
For he is many.
All right, let's talk about more Legion, because this is a Legion quest. But we're not going to talk about Legion quest right now, right?
No, we're not talking about Legion quest right now.
Got it.
We're going to talk about Legion quest as our third story, guys. I don't know what you expected. But no, for our second story today, we're going to talk about a story I really enjoy. X-Men Legacy, number 19 through 24. The trade is titled Legion, for we are many. It was written by Cy Spurrier with art on, I think, about half the issues by Tengen Hut and the other half by Koi Pham. This is the end of Cy Spurrier's incredibly good run on X-Men Legacy starring Legion from Legion. He didn't know he was starring in the show Legion yet. That would come later. But it really deals with David as a character in a way that I don't think the New Mutants arc ever did.
Oh, no.
No, I think...
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Of the three stories we're looking at, it's the one that most has him as a character than a plot device.
Exactly. And I think Cy Spurrier does a really good job throughout this entire arc, in this entire run, building up, this is who David is as a character. He struggles with mental illness. He struggles with the ghost and the burden of being Mutant Gandhi's kid. That's a lot on him. Mm-hmm. He struggles with having all of this power that he can't necessarily control, and that has ended poorly several times in his life. He's burdened with all of this stuff, and this arc poses the ultimate question of, hey, Legion, if you're going to destroy the world and there's nothing you can do to stop it, what do you do?
Well, and it's a fascinating reversal of what we often assume Legion is all about. Cy Spurrier does a very good job in the beginning of this run in establishing what the inside of David's brain looks like and how he's encountering his own supervillains as part of his own brain, and how he interacts with, how he merges with, how he defeats those characters is really the core of this series, aside from his relationship with Blindfold. Whereas this end arc kind of flips that on its head and says, if he can merge with everything inside of his brain, who's to say that he doesn't just merge with, like, the world? You know, and just sort of become a... What was that game where the character just kind of rolled around and, like, stuff stuck to it?
Katamari Damacy?
Yeah.
Like... Isn't that kind of what happens in this story until, like, he finally figures out how to overcome it? That's essentially what happens.
Yeah, you're not wrong. He does... End of the story, David Haller does Katamari Damacy a lot of stuff until he decides to delete his save file. And by save file, I mean himself from all existence.
Right, except we are left with a little bit of a teaser that he is inside Blindfold. That his consciousness is inside Blindfold.
Or at least that she remembers him.
Sure.
It's a shame that never really got followed up on.
Oh my gosh, no, it did not. We could have talked about the recent Peter Milligan Legion mini that only served to upset me.
Yeah, different direction for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, I want to ask, Matt, how do you feel about the art in this? Because... it's definitely unique.
But the thing I'd forgotten is the fact that it shifts over the course of the arc. I knew obviously it wasn't on like the full set, but I reread it earlier today, and I have the omnibus in front of me now, and I think both styles work in the sense that there's a build to the arc, and it has like a 3-act structure in a way. So when it's making the switches, it's not just happening in the middle of an issue because they needed to get a couple more pages ready to ship it. It would be different if they were sort of within the same issue and trying to keep everything consistent that way.
Yeah, I definitely think that of the two artists, Koi Pham is probably the weaker of the two.
Really?
And here's why, is because if I recall correctly, it's the other artist who is the initial artist on the series. So I sort of associate his work and his style with, with the series at large. However, here's what I will say, is that when it does switch over, those issues are much more superhero-y, in that, you have the full roster of the X-Men trying to, defeat Legion. So I think it does a good job of matching the content of the issue and the action of the issue when it does need to switch over. And it does manage to switch back, by the time we get to the final issue, so that, we can end in the same style that we began.
That said, Fan does have my favourite scene of the issue in the run, which is when David's talking with Blindspot. It's of course you can dance.
Oh, yeah. That is beautiful, isn't it?
It's beautiful. It's not my favorite scene in these issues,
Which
though.
is?
My favorite has to be when David is, he's finally confronting all of his inner demons. He's confronting all of his, desperate personality threads. And he's confronting, this yellow demon who was, an extension of him that took the shape of all his doubt and everything as Charles Xavier. And he talks, and there's a point where David and the being come to a conclusion that, you can't cure what's going on with you. You can't just be rid of your mental illness. It's something you just have to learn to live with every day. And I'll tell you, and I haven't talked about this much on the podcast because we like to keep it nice and light, but as someone who decided in the last, year to finally go to a doctor and get anxiety medication and just deal with the fact that, this isn't going away. That scene, especially on the reread, really impacted me. And I think that's one of the strengths of Spurrier as a writer, especially on this run, that unlike Claremont in the original New Mutant stuff, Spurrier not only has the appropriate language to talk about what's going on, he understands it at a deep level of, no, this is the reality of this situation. This is what people go through.
Well, and I want to talk about that in two different ways. One, the symbolism of having Blindfold come to both physically battle Legion from the exterior and also come inside of Legion's mind, and ending with the two of them making love, I think really does speak to also what having a relationship in terms of also dealing with, anxiety, whatever kind of mental distress you might be under, what that might be all about. The other thing I just want to note is that for people who have not read this, this is extraordinarily poetic in the way that Cy Spurrier does this entire series. The bulk of what you are reading is first-person narration that is stream of consciousness going through, speakers inside David's brain, text balloons, his own voice coming out of his own mouth. And it's all pieces of him talking to himself and to you as the reader. I made the joke the other day on Twitter that it's almost like reading Arthur Rimbaud. It has this sort of dark, desperate quality to it that is just exploring the inside monologue of this character. And I find it's really successful and in times extraordinarily beautiful the way that Spurrier handles this.
Well, it's a story that could so easily become didactic just from the amount of text that's going on and the conversations, but the fact that it's sort of self-actualization and it's not just there to be a rather overt message, it's all character intrinsic and everything like that, it really helps layer it in on multiple levels. And that, I think, the fact that then the arc becomes about a collective just happens to tie all of that up in a bow as well.
Well, we didn't talk about it in the New Mutants arc, but it is interesting just how much of Claremont's abundant text is squeezed into a lot of those pages. as part of the conversations. Here, I don't find it overwhelming. It almost becomes the lettering here almost becomes part of the artwork in terms of how it's laid out on the page, so that when you finally get a quiet moment late in the arc, there's this voice that has been sort of haunting Blindfold as we go through, and she realizes eventually that it's Xavier trying to tell David that he's proud of him. And, you know, whether that is genuine, whether it's mystical, whatever, however you want to interpret it, that moment becomes so much more important because of all of the text that we've been subjected to so far, and sort of the hail of all of those words as we've been going through.
Yeah, I think it does an excellent job balancing that. I mean, Cy Spurrier, we've talked about it on the podcast before, but he's a very wordy writer. He loves to just expand on things to the point of parody in some cases. But here it works incredibly well to get the specific neuroses of these characters through, and makes, like you're saying, those quiet moments so much more impactful.
Yeah, I can see why this would come across as off-putting to some people. I know that Cy Spurrier has his detractors out there. I am not one of them. I love that comic books like this exist and can, explore, superheroes in sort of unique ways. And the fact that this is mainly happening, even though it has sort of the context of an external crisis, you can kind of ignore that. This isn't some giant crossover or anything like that. You probably have the assumption that the apocalyptic thing that's happening on the outside is not really going to stick in this particular case, because we know this is like a sub-tier X-Men book as part of the larger publishing scheme. So we're able to focus on what the interior is of this one character, which is very, it's not something that you encounter very often in Big Two comics.
I think because of all of that, it really is just the best thing he's written as well.
I am a big fan of his X-Force run, but I agree. This is pretty singular in the way that it's done. It's exceptional. So
it's really good. I do think if there's one thing that I have any sort of qualms with, it's the ending, in that Legion writes himself out of existence, which I think works from a poetic standpoint, but also for a run that has dealt very deftly with mental illness, having a character essentially commit universal suicide is a weird way to end it.
See, I don't read the ending that way. I mean, you can obviously interpret the ending that as a being, as a physical being, he is no more, but a huge part of what he's all about is the idea that he is this sort of ambiguous psyche. And I read the ending that he has implanted himself inside of Blindfold. He literally says that he's in her head always. Now, you can take that symbolically, that he's a memory. I choose to believe that that's a little more literal, just because this is superhero comics, and I want to believe that he's there and that he's now a second voice in Blindfold's head.
Yeah, this is a incredibly good arc. Matt, how do you feel about it compared to the story we just ranked, compared to the New Mutants Legion?
I like this a lot more, and I would probably put this somewhere in the top 10.
Look, Matty boy, Matt. I love you. You're great. This isn't better than the time that Colossus and Juggernaut got into a bar fight, and Juggernaut picked up a bar and hit him with it.
I will.
I know, because I was thinking of it in terms of like Uncanny X-Men, Passion of Scott Summers, and Dark Angel Saga. So I think gradually I was just working my way up.
It's that big for you.
See, I'm not there, but
yeah,
I think this is definitely in the top section. Let me throw the literal next issue of this. X-Men Legacy 300 is at 37, another Cy Spurrier joint. I like it better than I like this better than that. Adam, are you on the same
I
page there?
I do, and I think the other thing we can probably compare it to is another Spurrier joint, which is at 35. We have X Club.
I really friggin' like X Club.
I know.
I really like X Club.
I know. It's a little difficult to beat Dr. Nemesis with his psychic starfish. I think...
Yeah, Matt, you know that Dr. Nemesis has a psychic starfish that says all of his innermost thoughts, and they're very both Dr. Nemesis-y and Cy Spurrier-y?
Nemesis and I are well acquainted.
I think we're on a good part of the list here, though, because at 33 and 34, we have two single character studies. At 33, we have the X-Men Icons Chamber miniseries, and at 34, we have New X-Men 127, which is a standalone Zorn issue. I'm going to say that I think that the Zorn issue, as a standalone piece of just absolute beautiful comic making, it probably stands above this for me.
Ooh, that's interesting.
How about for you?
I'll tell you, my ceiling is Inferno New Mutants at 30.
Okay. I could get there. I could put this again above Mutant Genesis. I think I might have trouble putting it against Bendis and Immonen's All New X-Men 1-5, which is pretty...
I forget, Matt, are you a guy who likes the Bendis X-Men, or are you a guy who doesn't like the Bendis X-Men? Because there's only two types of folks out there.
I think I like it more from an art perspective than I do a writing one, but at the same time it is maybe an art or run that I would reevaluate on the reread.
All right.
That's fair.
Totally fair.
But at the same time, while we've been looking at this section of the list, I'm sort of like, would I put it higher than that first lot of Ecstatics in X-Force 116 to 119?
Yeah, that one was my ceiling, and then I saw Inferno. I was like, oh wait, no, that one's also very, very good. There's babies being sacrificed, and Ileana going through an incredibly traumatic time where she also dies.
Yeah, that's strangely comparable. So I think if I was going to make a compromise, I would say that it would be our new 31, but I think I'd be more comfortable with it as the new 32. I'm going to leave this up to you guys.
I like the Bendis X-Men better. We're on a podcast named after a Bendis X-Men story. I'm going to be very honest.
So this is the new 32.
This will be not a bad showing, by the way, no. Mr. Spurrier. Cy Spurrier has like 3 stories in the top 40, and he's only written like 10 X-Men stories.
Well, it doesn't hurt that we like him.
Yeah, Cy Spurrier, you're very good at your job. I don't know what anyone's told you, but man, quite excellent.
Just please write more.
Yeah, please write more, Cy Spurrier. You're good at it. Now, Cy Spurrier didn't write the next comic, though.
Oh, no.
No.
The next comic is... Shoot, guys, it's a lot.
Oh, man.
This is the lead into the Age of Apocalypse. This is Legion Quest. It is a 4-part series with a prologue and not really an epilogue, just kind of a weird middle thing.
Oh, that one's weird. We got to talk about that.
Written by, and I'm just going down, Todd DeGazzo and John Francis Moore do the prologue in X Factor 109 with Jan Duursema on art. You have professional comic book writer Scott Lobdell and Mark Waid on Uncanny 320 with Roger Cruz, who swipes on art. I'm sorry, Roger Cruz. I'm not Joe Madureira. I know he's mad at you. I don't really care one way or another. Number 40 is my personal best friend Fabian Nicieza with pencils by Andy Kubert. 321 is Wade Lobdell, Ron Garney, who's still very good. 41 is Andy Kubert and Rob Garney with Nicieza doing some of the writing words again. And then on this weird cable number 20 in the middle, it's a head of Marvel TV Jeff Loeb with Ian Churchill issue.
So strange.
There's a lot going on here. Matt, what's this story that we named a podcast after once?
It is about Legion waking up out of a coma.
Yes.
And then everything goes horribly, horribly wrong for our heroes. And along the way, there is so much preamble that the timeline
There's a little
gets
bit of
loopy.
preamble. I mean,
Not just
look,
that.
this is a preamble to an event that some people in the 90s would call overblown or just so much, which is, of course, the beautiful and perfect Age of Apocalypse.
I am a fan of Legion Quest. I think this is a really interesting way to get into the Age of Apocalypse, but it is kind of a weird, messy crossover. The fact that it starts in an X Factor issue with Mystique.
That doesn't matter. The X Factor issue does not
Mystique
matter. It's Mystique being mad.
Yeah, trying to kill Legion for killing Destiny during the Muir Island saga. Then we're switching back and forth from Uncanny to X-Men, which I appreciate. We're not going over all the books. And then there's this very strange Cable issue that does not make a lot of sense. But at least
that very strange Cable issue does have Cable and Scott Summers and Jean Grey saying, "Hey, we're all a family, right?"
Oh, it's adorable.
And that's nice.
Yes, very adorable. And this is a time travel story. I don't think we've said that yet. David Haller is kicking back to Professor Xavier and Magneto's origin story, and essentially is there to assassinate Magneto so that, you know, what he sees as wrong with the present will never happen.
Yeah, that ends bad for him.
And everybody.
I think, so one thing I really like is that it explores the dynamic between Charles Xavier and Magnus very well. It shows them both as flawed characters, but three-dimensional characters in a way that I really hope... One, I think the movies have kind of beaten that to death.
Oh my God.
But I do hope Legion Season 3 that has cast Viserys Targaryen, the one that got covered in gold, as Charles Xavier, Harry Lloyd. And I'm excited to see how that plays out.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting. But the basic premise here of some of the X-Men being shot back in time, and David essentially pretending to be his father, and then eventually accidentally killing his father, and then there's this Macron crystal stuff happening in the background. It's a pretty complicated thing to keep track of over the 4 issues. And of course, it ends with, the end of X-Men as we know it.
I think it's interesting to contrast it to the Claremont issues, because when he's doing interludes and sort of things away from Muir Island, even if it's in service of setting up kind of future plot lines, it's creating parallels within the story he's telling currently.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this, the first Uncanny X-Men issue, I wasn't a big fan of the way it starts in medias res. It's because of the fact that you then have to jump back, and it almost makes you feel like you've missed something in that crossover.
I did literally think that I had missed an issue, and I had to go check.
Well, just before I forget as well, you know the giant Legion Quest trade they put out?
Sure.
Yeah, this is like the back quarter of it. Because
What's the rest? There's only 6 issues.
There's it's X-Men Unlimited, things like that. Because I just kept scrolling through on Comixology and being like, these are still not the issues you told me to read.
That's very strange to me, because this is pretty hyper-focused.
Well, once you actually get into it,
Mm-hmm.
I think it gets a little bit too complicated when you bring in the Shi'ar. Just pick up, you're already having to do the past and present jumps as well. The second you sort of add in another antagonistic force onto that.
Yeah, I think the Shi'ar stuff, I understand that they're trying to set up that, by the way, the Emcon crystal is shattering and it's taking over the entire world and it's going to destroy all life and all existence. So they need to set that up because that's their catalyst for the Age of Apocalypse. But also they do a bad job.
I agree. I mean, the focus here is so much on what's happening on Earth that the intergalactic force that is going to then propel everybody into this alternate universe, it's not explained very well. You know, it's sort of an excuse for everything to crystallize. And when we get out of this, we get a new line of books. But at that same time, I do like the general premise of this story of having some of the X-Men go back to, however many years this is, it's very difficult. They call it 20 years ago. Who knows with sliding timeline what the heck that actually means. But
past the before times.
Yeah, but I do like that basic premise. I mean, I generally like time travel stories. It's fine. And then we do get some problematic stuff here. I think
David does an incest rape thing, and it's not good. It's bad, and it's a weird touch to the story. And why is that there?
I don't know. I mean, at least it's off panel for the most part, but it is pretty strongly insinuated that David does take his father's form and then make love to his mother, which is, oh boy. I didn't know.
It's one of those things where it could have damaged a character forever.
It should have, but Legion wasn't much of a character at the time.
No.
And all this gets undone because also at the end of Age of Apocalypse, Legion definitely writes himself out of existence again. He tends to do that, I guess. That's his go-to move.
And then just pops up again. No biggie. Yeah. So how successful this is, I don't really know. It's definitely not as successful as some of the other crossovers we've talked about. I do appreciate that it's just bouncing between the two books. It's not Executioner's Song where I have to be reading the entire line to figure out what's going on. The bookends here are weird. X Factor 109 is Mystique trying to kill Legion. The epilogue, I guess, suggests that they've been warned about the incoming crystal wave by Lalandra, so they, all the characters that are sort of standing around waiting for the rest of the story to take place are, having these moments. And some of them are good. Some of them contradict things that happen in X-Men Volume 241. And it's just I don't know. It's strange, But I guess if you needed an Ian Churchill makeout scene between Domino and Cable, you've got that.
And look, I did.
Okay. Fair.
Though, on the point of makeout scenes, I do think where this arc is most successful outside of like the Charles and Xavier early year stuff is in X-Men 41 by Nicieza and Kubert, where they are going through and seeing what the X-Men who aren't in the past are doing faced with their end of days. Warren and Jean and Scott, like being the original X-Men, they just kind of have a moment where Warren's feeling alone, but he hangs out with his old friends one last time. And probably the biggest thing is Rogue and Gambit have a moment and they get to share their first kiss as the world ends. And it's very poetic and very good for people invested in that specific relationship.
Yeah, I think it does a much better job. I think Fabian's, just more successful in nailing what those scenes should be. And it's not stretched out over an entire issue. There's other stuff going on. Sure. I think it works a little bit better. But as a, sort of weird story to lead into one of the most historic crossovers of all comics, I think it's still pretty successful.
I think the epilogue is. Everything else, I think the past becomes infinitely more interesting than everything in the present during the main storyline. It's because it's all collapsing in on itself. And so when it's all kind of feeding into that. And
so I think with all this, we would agree that this is probably the weakest of the three stories that we talked about today.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the writing's not terrible, but we've got Cruz ripping off lots of Jim Lee art, which is very obvious. Kubert's doing a pretty solid job here on his issues, but this certainly is not as strong as the other two things that we've reviewed. So
at 140 on our list is Fatal Attractions. Is this better or worse than Fatal Attractions?
I don't think it's as good as Fatal Attractions.
Is it better or worse than Phalanx Covenant Final Sanction, where Cable and Wolverine fight a mountain?
Better.
Okay, that puts us in a good spot.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Is it better or worse than cocaine?
Oof.
Worse.
Should we explain that to Matt?
Matt, that's the story where Wolverine gets on a roof and yells cocaine.
I'm acquainted with cocaine.
Okay, good. Not everyone is. I think that story has an actual title, but I don't know.
Nope, that's what we've got it on the list as, and that's what it stays as. Here's what I will say. I think this would make a pretty solid 155. I don't think it's as good as the Wolverine cocaine arc, but I do think that it's better than that standalone Champions issue, and what's right below it at 156 is Uncanny 300, and I think this is better than that.
I definitely agree with 300. I'm on the fence on that Champions issue because I do like it. That Champions issue has Flyclops in it, which is Cyclops when he figures out how to fly.
Yeah, but this does have more consequence. You know, that for as messy as it is still consequential. And I think it does help to read it if you are trying to sort of get a sense of like, what the heck happened before Age of Apocalypse? Like, how did we end up here, even if it doesn't make all the sense in the world?
I think that's fair. I think it's fair to make this our new number 155 Legion Quest.
Nice.
And that's it. We've ranked 3 stories, which is what we do on the podcast, Legion Quest. Is that not right, Adam?
That is not my show. That's your show with Matt, but...
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm sorry, Matt. That was muscle memory just kind of kicking in there.
That's fine. It happens to everyone.
So, before we sign off for today, you know, Legion Season 3 starts this evening, and Matt, as our resident Legion expert, wanted to get your thoughts on it, your expectations. You know, what are you going into this evening? What are you bringing to the show, and what do you think the show is going to give to you?
I think that I'm coming into it with the sense that I don't really know what to expect, which I think has been true of the show since the beginning. Mm-hmm. And even if it's we know there's going to be a sense of finality to this one, and maybe there's a sense that it'll be tighter because it's not 10 episodes like the last season was.
Right.
But at the same time, I think it will still have that visual quality and the abstractness, which means, you know, even if you just watch like the minute trailer that they put out sometime last month, it still feels inventive. It still feels vivid and fresh. And I don't know if I'm as enthusiastic as I was going into season 2, just because it took a little bit more work to sort of appreciate compared to season 1's narrative and where that ended up going.
I think that's fair. I think season 1 was a heck of a lot tighter, but I like where things are going here. I think that Holly's going to surprise us. I think there's going to be there's a lot of interesting stuff to deal with here, and I think this is going to continue to be one of the most challenging shows on the internet. And by internet, I mean television, and it's going to be a good time. But yeah, I think Legion Season 3 is going to be real fun. And what else has been real fun is, Matt, you being on this podcast today. Tell the people where...
Back on the airways.
Tell the people where they can find you nowadays.
It's the same handle as it always was, at Matt_Sibley. And I'm still writing for Newsarama as and when I can. A little bit more difficult now in the adult world, but hopefully when this goes up, I should have a review of Kelly Thompson's 3rd issue of her Sabrina miniseries.
Awesome.
So I decided I was going to tackle that.
Looking forward to that. Well, I can tell you guys, dear listeners, that Battle of the Atom, which is this podcast, we aren't Legion Quest. Well, we're kind of Legion Quest today. But normally in your RSS feed, this is Battle of the Atom. Is a 100% Patreon supported show. You can go over to patreon.com/XavierFiles, toss in as little as $2 a month, and get an entire episode just like this, handcrafted around one of your suggestions. We've got a long backlog, so get that money in now, I guess. I don't care. This is your money. Do what you want. You can also find me online at Xavier Files on Twitter or at XavierFiles.com, where I have all the latest and greatest in X-Men news and other things. We have a very good editorial that should be up by now that looks at if, based on Catholic canon and X-Men canon combined, Nightcrawler could say a red mass for Mars, on Mars.
Nice.
which is a tweet I made, and then someone wrote 6,000 words about, and I'm so proud of it. It's legitimately, I would submit that as the only thing to say, no, you need to give my website an Eisner this year, because it's the best piece of friggin' comics journalism I've read in a while.
It's very bold, very bold.
I'm not joking. I read it and I said, this is incredible. There's 2,000 words about the specific bylaws of the Roman Catholic Church before we get to how wild the Chuck Austin run is. And it all works. You need it it's all there to build up to the fact of just how wildly off base the Chuck Austin run is. It's an incredibly good dragging, and I am so here for it. Adam, where can people find you?
Guys, you can always follow me on Twitter at Arthur Stacy. New pages of Bish and Jubes, Cross Time Conundrum come out every X-Men Monday at adamrec.tumblr.com. Last week, if you missed it, going over to Sketched, that's SKTCHD.com. Zack and I were part of the Hickman X draft. We were invited by David Harper to participate in it. It's a subscription site, but I highly recommend you to subscribe and check out the article. We both have sort of pretend pitches for the Hickman era, and it's pretty cool. Also, we recorded later this week now, but I'm not sure when this is going up, but our friends over at Chris's on Infinite Earths have been covering the Battle of the Atom comic book crossover, and Zack and I were guests on the finale of that series. So check out Chris's on Infinite Earths podcast to hear that.
I did peer pressure my good friend Chris into doing that.
I may have said something as well, so I'm glad that we're going to be doing that.
Well, Matt, it's been a ton of fun doing this with you. I honestly wish that life hadn't gotten in the way of, us doing Legion Quest each and every week.
Life, you say?
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, if Legion Quest never happened, we'd probably never even form our Battle of the Atom.
Never, you say? Oh, that can be arranged.
Matt?
Matt?
That was odd.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, until next time, this has been Battle of the Atom. Adam?
Hey, what's with this crystal?
Adam, it's on me.
Zack.